Live from the NBC Montana studios, this is NBC Montana Today.
Good morning, Montana. I'm Jason Hurst. Thanks for waking up with us. We have a live guest today, but first, let's head on over to Chief Meteorologist Brooke Foster with a quick look at your weather.
Well, the time is at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning. You may find yourself reaching for a jacket. We're sitting at 32 in Butte, 35 in Missoula, 42 in Bozeman, 43 in Kalispell. We still have a few isolated showers out there, at least in northwest Montana and along Highway 12. More of a nuisance than anything. And throughout the day today, we are expecting those showers to really diminish through the morning hours, and we have dry skies for the bulk of the day. Here's your afternoon planner. Missoula at around lunchtime, still cool at 43, 49 in that 2 o'clock hour. Really feeling like fall this afternoon. Sunshine with that temperature in the low 50s for the drive home. For Bozeman, you'll see a mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures in the 40s through about 2 p.m. Then once we get into the afternoon, temperatures warming into the 50s. Cold front. It's our next weather maker. Details in 10 minutes.
We're doing things a little different this morning. I am joined by Dr. Christopher Servheen, one of the country's leading wildlife experts on grizzly bear management. We appreciate you coming in this morning. And before we get into it, I figured I would let the viewers at home know a little bit about your background. So that's where I'm going to start, and to let them know that you are a grizzly bear recovery coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 35 years, and you oversaw all research and management of grizzly bears in the lower 48 states. Now, you retired from the Fish and Wildlife Service in 2016, is that correct? And presently, you are the co-chair of the North American Bears Expert Team of the International Union for Conservation of Nature Bear, and president and board chair of the Montana Wildlife Federation. And you've been a busy guy. This past week, you were in Bozeman, and this week you were in Missoula, and you're holding a conference to talk about the grizzly bears and also the wolves and how it impacts the wildlife here, but also how, as Montana's growing, it has an impact. Is that correct?
Right. On Wednesday night at 7 o'clock at the Wilma, we're going to talk about the future for bears and wolves in Montana. Doug Smith, who used to be the lead wolf biologist for Yellowstone Park, and I will each give short presentations on grizzly bears and wolves, and then we'll have a conversation and take questions from the public about what's happening, you know, the development of Montana, the increase in risk to grizzly bears that's occurring, and the possibility of them connecting across the landscape between Yellowstone and the Bob Marshall complex.
Now, last week when you were in Bozeman, what were common questions that you were asked?
Well, a lot of people were concerned about the future for grizzly bears and wolves. People are concerned about the way wolves are being treated, you know, the excessive trapping risk. And a lot of that wolf trapping risks grizzly bears too, because grizzly bears can be caught and captured in those wolf traps. People are concerned about that. The subdivision and urban sprawl that's occurring in Montana. You know, we have hundreds of thousands of new residents that are moving in, and a lot of these people are moving into places where grizzly bears used to live. And so it's a risk for grizzly bears as more and more people live here. And we've got to get education out to those people to minimize conflicts with bears and try to get cooperation from the public to make sure that these bears and wolves have a good future in the next 10, 20 or more years in Montana.
I asked you what questions were coming up, but what is, from the data and the things that you're learning, is there anything that's alarming or something that's a concern with both the grizzly bears and the wolves as you continue to speak throughout the state?
Well, I think the big issue with grizzly bears is the risk that grizzly bears face through excessive mortality. Things that cause grizzly bears mortality, black bear hunting of hounds in grizzly bear habitat can be a risk factor. Wolf traps can be a risk factor. And just people with garbage and sanitation around their houses. A lot of people move into grizzly bear habitat and they don't realize they've got to keep things really clean, otherwise they'll have bears around. And you know, we need bears to live in the long term rather than dying here and there as they get into trouble with people. And that education and outreach is important as we get more and more people here. A lot of people are new, they don't know much about bears or wolves, and it becomes complicated for wildlife managers.
Well, you mentioned this used to be their home, and the growth of Montana has had an impact, but how are they adapting?
Well, you know, they're pretty wary around people. Both species are pretty careful around people. The ones that aren't careful are the ones that get into trouble and get killed. You know, we have grizzly bears living very close to people now, and a lot of people don't know that. Bears are often nocturnal, and they're very careful around people. Even in the Missoula area, we've got grizzly bears. We're in the North Hills, really close to town here. And we try to encourage people to secure their garbage, pick their fruit and clean their gardens up so that grizzly bears aren't drawn into conflicts.
Now, have they become more aggressive?
No, they haven't become more aggressive. They become pretty wary around people. They don't really become aggressive unless they're really put into a bad situation. Most of the time they're just trying to get something to eat and stay out of trouble, and when they get into conflicts, it's usually our fault, not theirs.
What are some of the things that you're looking forward to as you meet with people on this week? You mentioned being able to talk with different groups that you've already spoken with in Bozeman, but this week in particular, what are you excited about here in Missoula?
Well, there's a lot of people in Missoula that are really interested in bears. You know, it's a big subject in town, as you know. Anytime there's an event about grizzly bears, we're the Montana Grizzlies, of course, so people are thinking about bears all the time in Missoula. And we'll have this event in the Wilma at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, and hopefully we'll get a lot of people there to talk about bears and their future and wolves.
And we talked a lot about the bears, but again, we have about 30 seconds left. Is there anything that you would like to touch on as far as the wolves? Because again, we talked mostly about the grizzly bears.
Well, wolves are a really important species in Montana. You know, they've come down from Canada and reoccupied a lot of the country we have here. People tend to demonize wolves, that they're really bad, that they eat all the elk, and they're putting the livestock industry at risk. Neither one of those things is true. Wolves are, you know, part of the environment. They've always been here before we got here, and we need to respect them and their need to be alive in the landscape. They bring value to Montana. You know, they're one of the things that makes Montana what it is, the wild place, the last best place. We want to keep it that way.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. I've been in Montana for 3 weeks now, and I have certainly learned a lot this morning, so I appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your time.
Good talking to you.
Appreciate it. And now we're going to